Yeah, I mean, growing up to Indian immigrant parents, there was like Radio India is like, if you can find the theme song to that, every brown person would be like, oh, it's my jam. That was always on in the household, evenings while mom's cooking or weekends when dad's taking us to hockey lessons or whatever. Personally, my sister got me more into like music that I actually grew up on, I'd say, that I actually understood. And it starts with like, I don't know, like En Vogue.
Prejudice. Wrote a song about it? Like to hear it? Here it go. Free your mind.
Welcome to This Broken Mixtape, the podcast that rewinds and presses play on the soundtrack to your life. I'm Jeff Wu.
And I'm Justin Lee.
Toronto's Practice is a recurring live jam session that unites a rotating roster of talented musicians, vocalists, and MCs to improvise hip-hop, soul, and funk songs. Along with Joseph W. Salusbury, Jahmal Padmore, Koiter and Matthew Progress, co-founders Gaurav Sawhney and Gavin Whelehan have turned Practice into one of the most exciting live music nights in Toronto today. We sat down with Gaurav and Gavin to discuss how they started Practice, the music that they grew up on, and which musicians they would recruit for their live jam dream team.
This week on the show, we have the co-founders of Practice, Gaurav Sawhney and Gavin Whelehan. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks, man.
Thanks so much for having us, man.
I think at this point, most people know what Practice is, but any of our listeners who don't, break it down for us and pretty much how you guys came up with the idea.
Sure. Why don't you go for explain what it is?
Sure. I guess we like to call it kind of like a curated musical jam night. Is that fair?
That sounds amazing.
Thanks. And the idea is it's kind of like the anti-jam, just because musical jams tend to be, like a lot of people showing off over top of each other and not really listening to each other, not really sharing the stage in the true sense and creating something together. It's like, it's almost like a bunch of people fighting for space. Mm. So we wanted to create something that was not only collaborative, but also somewhat on the hip hop tip, because that's what we came up on always and what we love the most. But and that we felt was underrepresented, I guess. So I have to say it was G's brainchild, I think, originally.
Yeah, it was maybe about 3 summers ago, driving around. I was learning how to DJ, and an idea was to just practice in public. And that came into we don't really get to see bands practice in public, so maybe we can create a space for that to happen and just have some people that are great musicians or friends of ours get on a stage, create some music together and see where that goes. And it's been 2.5 years since then.
Yeah, it's cool.
Are you guys yourself musicians?
I definitely am not. I have zero musical talent, but Gavin's got the
whether
skills.
I am or not is debatable.
Yeah.
I produce music. I'm a terrible player. Mm-hmm. Anybody who's come to Practice and seen me play will attest to that. But I sit on stage sometimes, and I like to create like a texture or something that just sits behind people or will add some kind of energy or. But for me, I'm a studio guy, so I write music. I'm not the greatest at playing it, and I usually hire other people to play my parts for me, which has also been great because through Practice, I've met so many amazing musicians that I wouldn't have otherwise known.
Right. From the start, it's been myself organizing, Gavin, Joseph from Joseph of Mercury was one of our founding members too. Jahmal Padmore, who plays drums and strings and is a super talented musician. Koiter, who plays bass and keys for Shad and is also just like a gem of a musician. And Matthew Progress, who hosts the night for us.
Mm-hmm. And so how does it work? Like, how did you guys... I know that you sort of invited a lot of your friends, musician friends and whatnot, but Does it start off with like sort of a base number of musicians and then people can sign up? Like how does the whole process work?
It's taken like a lot of different shapes. We started out at a small venue. We invited some friends. They invited their friends, and a few sessions and we were kind of over capacity, and it was mostly musicians in the room. And then we did this open sign up thing. We got some great press, and that was like the people we didn't know started showing up with instruments, and it kind of grew into this like, let's get everybody on stage. In recent sessions, we've kind of whittled it down to like a much more curated experience. We have these like 5, 10, 12 players that are the core band, and they're going to be the band for that evening. And then you kind of have to ask one of the organizers or one of the musicians that's in the core band if you can kind of take a spot or fill a seat.
Yeah, we still like to give a shine to people who want to, try it out and kind of don't necessarily get the chance to play on stage very much. But when we sort of opened it up to everybody at a certain point, it was just like chaos, like it just started going in all these directions. And so, yeah, like G said, like we've actually been really like, it's hard to tell, I guess, as an audience member, but it's been like a constant tailoring of the format, because each week or like we sit down and we have a meeting and we're like, what went right, what went wrong, and so we've introduced like some new things, like kind of almost game based things where we give people limitations, or we ask the musicians on stage to like create something in the style of a beat that a DJ will play, something like that. So yeah, we're kind of switching it up all the time.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes more sense, because you need a little bit of focused direction. Otherwise, like you said, it just go off the rails, and it could turn into something like that people just wouldn't want to watch and listen to.
Oh, trust me, we have no problem shutting down a bad jam. Yeah,
you have to shut down a bad jam.
Yeah.
And it's funny, man. The event is like very much alive, and you don't know where it's gonna go every single time. Every single event, we have these meetings. We like put all these ideas together. Okay, this is how we'll keep it from going off the rails. We'll introduce this, and we'll introduce this other thing, and at this point in the night, we'll do this. And then none of it works, but it's a great night.
Yeah, like you never know. It's kind of the fun of it, is you never know what's gonna happen. Sometimes like we'll hit our peak at like 9:30 p.m. as far as energy and stuff goes. And sometimes it's like a super slow burn, and it happens, all in this long evolving crescendo, I guess, So it's different every time, which is great.
So in terms of like, let's say you're an MC or vocalist, you can just sort of sign up even while you're there. And
yeah, I mean, typically there's a lot of people lining up to sing. And it's also always like physically a bit pinched, because, one of the things actually that we try to do is put the emphasis on the musician, like the players. So the vocalists, we intentionally have off to the side of the stage, which means that there's this kind of like clump of people who are all vying for space on the mic. But we try and usually we have Jahmal up there kind of picking people out, and there's a lot of singers that we know and rappers that we know that we want to hear, and then we try and give people like a chance to get up if we see them sort of waiting in line. But usually the best thing, just for anybody who's listening that comes through, is to find one of us and talk to us, on the side or ahead of time. Because we tried the sign up sheet thing, and it was just like, you inevitably can't get to somebody, and then they're upset, and
and it removes some of the kind of like organic group of like, the three of us want to like play together right now, or we think that these 3 or 4 should play together right now. And it's like, to have a great night full of improvised music, you want the quality to be at a certain level. So letting everybody go up has its, downsides definitely. So it's about how do we make sure that people that we don't know, we can see and give them a chance to play, but also make sure that everyone that gets up there is going to give the audience a great night.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever had somebody that went up and, you guys were just like, do your thing, and then they were just awful?
Have we ever?
Yeah.
Have we ever
but at
not?
what point do you shut it down? You're like, after that first note, you're like, yeah,
we'll give somebody like 16 bars kind of thing.
Yeah.
To, because we've had some like people who are like, subjectively kind of terrible, but it's super entertaining too,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they might even bring the crowd in on it somehow. So you can't just be like, no, right away. And also, like, we're trying to make things as positive as possible. We don't really want to just clamp down on people.
Sure.
But yeah, we'll give them like a limited amount of time.
And credit due to the audiences too. Like, even in like moments that aren't the best, the audiences have generally been really supportive. There's never been like the Apollo like getting booed off the stage or anything like that. And I think we which would be amazing.
There's a true community vibe, and like there's so much energy kind of being bounced back and forth from like the performers and the audience. So it's unlike anything you ever see. And I think Toronto audiences get shit on all the time that they're not live enough, like they don't care, they're not, dancing.
I think it's changing, man. Yeah,
people are just the opposite at practice.
It's true. Yeah, that's something we are proud of. Is like the amount of people that come up to us and they're like, "Man, I've never been here before, and this was I've never seen anything like this," kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I agree. That is our reputation in Toronto. But I do think it's kind of slowly changing, and we want to be a part of that. I think too. I think
absolutely. Yeah, and another key thing for us with the event is, as Gavin was saying, we keep the vocal mics off to the side stage because it's always front and center. It's like, who's the best drummer? Who's the best keys player? Who's the best female bassist in Toronto? Do you know who that is? And if we're going to be like a real music city, that would be a beautiful thing to change, to make sure that the instrumentalists are just as important to us. And I think that's going to be a cool shift. And if we can have a part in changing that, that'd be amazing.
Do you guys ever have like sort of drop in like surprise guests from more like actual established acts?
We had Mick Jenkins MC,
yeah, that was actually great.
One of the first episodes, actually.
And he hit the mic a few times and smashed it too.
Yeah, for sure.
We've had some like interesting kind of like a lot of like session people that I didn't even know who they were, and then somebody's like, "Yo, that guy played on the Weeknd's record," or whatever. But
there's some great players that'll jump in or like hear about the night and come through, and also vocalists that come through. Like, Ralph has been pretty regular, and Tika. I think
Tika's first performance on stage was with Practice.
That's what I think she said. That's like
that's crazy to me.
Amazing to know, because she's really taken off since then. And that's kind of like one of the most fun things, is like who's going to end up showing up. The beauty would be if, Kendrick's playing on a Monday night and his band shows up. Like, I'd love to see that kind of stuff happen too. And
we're still hoping for that kind of like, I don't know. We'd like the word to spread a bit more. And we have talked about maybe connecting with similar events in other cities, or starting a chapter in other cities, so that when musicians do come to town, they kind of already know,
Sure.
Totally.
It's just one of those dreams.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Well, gee, you manage Shad. Has Shad ever shown up?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. He's been on the mic. He sat back in the cut and played some strings, which people don't know. Shad's got some skills in that environment. And that's been cool, like just seeing Toronto scene come out and support Cola, Claremont the Second. There's people that have definitely developed their audience in their own right and are coming into Practice to like, I heard about it, let me check in, let me play. Charlotte Day Wilson's been to the show and been on stage doing some vocals. It's cool.
Yeah, I remember the first time I heard her, actually. I was on stage and I just heard this voice, and I was like, and I wasn't familiar with her work. This is like 2-3 years ago, when we used to be at the Burdock. And it was like one of those voices that just fills a room, And I turned around and I'm like, that is not coming out of that person. Like, that was she's just like so small, And anyway, we can't afford her anymore.
It's so interesting to see like if the event maintains an energy that welcomes that kind of talent, where it's like, this is a cool event, I still want to come by and drop something, when it's a room full of welcoming people, but it's also so and so artists have reached a certain level of success. Are they still going to want to come through? And I think keeping the quality of musicians on stage real strong, I think that's brought back that sense. I think even for us as organizers, we're just more excited about the event every time it comes up, because we know the music's going to be really good. And you start seeing collaborations happen where, so-and-so drummer started to play in so-and-so's band, and that kind of network starts to build and develop through just having a good time on a Monday night. And that's been cool too.
Do you guys ever like video or even just like audio record these things?
So we've tried recording it through the board a couple times, and it's terrible. The sound is just not the same, as it is live. It's one of those things that I always want to do, but I have my day job, and running around setting that stuff up is actually kind of complicated. We definitely have talked to people about videoing, doing a proper documentary sort of thing. Not like we want to make a documentary, quote unquote, but like to have somebody document a night. And it's kind of a big favor to ask, because we don't, we're not making money off of this thing. So to just ask somebody who's a professional, can you come and video this thing and just edit it? Like, hey man, please. Like it's kind of a lot. So we would like to, I think it'll happen. But as thus far, it's just not, essentially not in the budget.
And it's also like, to film and to capture energy that's in practice is, I say, particularly tricky, because it's not like songs that people know. Recording live music, film and audio is so difficult to catch the real energy in the room. Like, you have to mic the room, you can't just get it out of the board. And then on top of it, there's like an energy that's like specific to practice, and these are songs that no one's heard about. So it's different when you hear like, a Drake song, you're like, well, the video and the audio is shit, but I know the song and I love it, or whatever it is. When it's something that's being created live in front of you, there's such a special energy in the room that's tangible when you're there. But I don't know if that's really like,
I mean, it takes a certain
that,
skill, like there's people, there's filmmakers that do live,
they just specialize in that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work.
And you watch
if you're
that,
out there,
that
find
footage.
us, we need you.
Yeah.
If you're listening to
Martin
this.
Scorsese, where are you? One thing that we've talked about is like, we have a lot of, ambitions for practice, I think, being more than it is right now, whatever that might mean. But one of those things, I think, is just in a general sense, like, how do we showcase these people? These, like, the talent that comes to practice is like mind-boggling, so we've considered doing like almost like a setup kind of thing, where it's like in a studio, and it's a bit more of a controlled environment.
Sure.
Because I think if you were going to capture like a magical moment from an actual practice night, you'd have to film the entire thing and then hope that one of those magic moments happens, and then create a little vignette out of that.
Sure.
But it's like that. It's just so much work,
There's so many moving parts, and it's like, that whole idea of the night can peak in the second jam, and then it's like great the rest of the night, but it's like it
or
hit
at
that moment.
1:30 a.m.
Or at 1:30
what I mean?
when like
So,
Zach Ibrahim comes out, and
Right.
there's a house jam and she's blowing
That's
the
right,
roof off. Things happen in those magical moments, and you're right, you have to like have someone that's ready to film the entire night. We've been blessed to have Yasmin Butcher come and do photography for the night and just kind of like capture a moment there. And that's been nice, just to add like some visual and some texture to the night as well, captured in the right way. But video and audio would be a beautiful next step.
Yeah, we'd love it, man.
Yeah.
So holler at us.
I like the studio idea, though, getting that kind of set up.
Yeah, it could be really cool, man, especially just considering the people. But then, like my fear there is we get all these people together, you set up the cameras and the mics, and it's like, okay, everybody go. And it's just like, wah, wah. Like you never know, right? Because it's like a totally improvised thing.
Yeah. I've had like the boiler room, like that idea. We've had like the boiler room, but live band, where like the audience is actually into it and not too cool to move to it. But, like that real like crazy energy that is in practice, but in a live room setting could be very fun.
Yeah.
But there's been ideas. It's just a matter of,
executing.
We all have jobs. We all have like projects that we're working on.
We're all sort of Toronto people too, who have like a million hustles on the go. And this is one thing that we do. So, and there's 5 of us, so just imagine coordinating just a meeting, never mind like planning all this stuff. But I think we do have ambitions to do that kind of thing. To answer your question, finally, how long was that?
Cool. So I know that you guys started off at the Burdock, and now you're doing sort of a permanent thing for now anyway at the Drake Hotel.
Yeah.
Drake Underground. How many shows do you put on a year?
Originally it was once a month, which was just too much of a burden for us. But so it's about 6 now.
Yeah, we try to go every other month. And the Drake's been really great. They hosted us the first time for their What's in the Box festival a few years back.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just really supportive. They love the idea of like having a bunch of musicians come out together. But once every 2 months is about what we can manage, what we're excited to like put on. And also it leaves like, you know, the band and the musician and the audience excited for the next one. It's been a sweet spot, I'd say.
Yeah, it's true.
Great. So let's go into your own sort of musical taste and like your journey with music. You know, let's start off with you. If you can just tell us like what kind of music did you sort of, I mean, Practice definitely leans more towards hip hop, R&B, soul. Was that pretty much what you were listening to when you first got into music, or how did?
No, like growing up, I had two parents, like everybody. Mm-hmm. But they have very different musical tastes, but both very broad musical tastes. So music was like a huge part of my childhood, like all throughout my upbringing. And my mom was always listening to classical music and, you know, Indian classical music and sort of folk music from all around the world, Irish folk music, fado from Portugal, flamenco music. And my dad was like a big, you know, rock and roll and jazz and soul music kind of guy. And they both had great vinyl collections and stuff. So growing up, I just got it all. And then I grew up, you know, as a teenager in downtown Toronto and got into the rave scene at about 16. So I was like super into house and jungle music. I have no regrets. And and
not even fashion.
The fashion, yeah, 100%.
He's still wearing his mod robes, guys.
Yeah. No, I never wore mod robes. Get out of here.
One of those right now.
No way. Oh yeah, you're right. Damn. Also at that age and a bit before, I started listening to hip hop and got really into electronic music. And then I started making music at about 17, 18 years old. So yeah, it's been a big, broad melting pot for me musically. Yeah. Does that answer your question? I don't know.
Absolutely.
Okay,
I mean, if you can give us like sort of what was that first album that like made you want to get into music production?
Oh, it's funny. There's so many things. I think it's, you know, it's weird actually. The first thing that made me think I can do this was, if anybody's familiar with Bookworm from Toronto, there was a hip hop crew called Audible Oddities, and like he's now a friend of mine. But back then he was like this magical Torontonian that I never got to meet, whose beats were crazy. But I was like, he's my age-ish, and he can do it, so why can't I, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It was also kind of like a defiant thing for me, because I was like, I asked somebody that I knew who knew about something about music creation. And I was like, I was a big computer nerd, and I was like, I want to use my computer to make music. And he was like, oh, you need like a $200,000 studio to do that. Or you need to spend all this money on like hardware synthesizers and drum machines and stuff. And I was like, fuck that. Sorry, can I swear? I don't know.
Yeah,
of course.
And I was like, you know, I'm going to do this my own way, which was like ill-advised, because it took me years there was nobody to teach me, and I had to like kind of trick my way into it. And I used all these crazy ass programs that didn't, you know, do what I wanted them to do. And so it was like, it wasn't necessarily an individual thing. Like Bookworm was an influence to me once I started actually being good at it. But like initially I was just like, I like this thing, computers, and I like this thing, music, and I'm going to make them go together, whatever anybody says, you know. I don't know why I was so angry about it, but I was determined. Yeah. So that was my beginning there.
Okay. And G, how about you? What was your sort of entry point into music?
Yeah, I mean, growing up to Indian immigrant parents, there was like Radio India is like, if you can find the theme song to that, every brown person would be like, oh, it's my jam. That was in the house.
Can you sing it right now?
Hell no. You know, I don't got that talent. But that was always on in the household, evenings while mom's cooking, or weekends when dad's taking us to hockey lessons or whatever. Personally, my sister got me more into like music that I actually grew up on, I'd say, that I actually understood. And it starts with like, I don't know, like En Vogue and Mariah Carey and stuff like that. And then personally for myself, it was pretty late, man. Like hip hop definitely like was the driving force, and I think it was probably as late as like the 9th grade, like Wu-Tang, Triumph, and Northern Touch, that 20th year anniversary. That I'd say that's a pretty good mark for like where I was really getting into the things that I particularly was attracted to. And there was that thing inside you where like, I want to know more about this. I gotta like watch Rap City now, and I gotta like start wearing the clothes that they're wearing, and you start getting like involved in this whole thing that you don't even realize you're that interested in. You're just going with it at that age. I went through my like jiggy rap era, and I think quite late got into like my Tribes and my Dilla beats and that kind of world. And
so, I mean, how did you eventually get into music management?
Yeah, Shad and I both went to Laurier together. I remember going to see Common with him. That like we ended up at the same Common concert and we hung out, and that was like really seeing like rapper with like live band. That blew my mind. I'd never seen that before, for example. But Shad and I were friends at Laurier, and I didn't even know dude made music. He was just like really humble and low key as you'd expect him to be. And a friend was like, "Have you heard Shad's album? What the fuck are you talking about?" And then I copped a disc off of him out of his backpack, and that music actually really influenced my life dramatically. The messages in that first record, while I was just getting out of university and getting into like corporate working environments, his messaging kind of like pulled me out of that pretty quickly. And yeah, we just became really good friends, and through a concert for him, through another, through a party, started managing, and things kind of took root from there.
So going back to practice, one of the things, I mean, I spoke of earlier is that it does lean more towards R&B, soul, hip hop. Was that always a conscious decision, or are you guys open, for it to go into other genres?
Yeah, it can take its shape definitely, but it was absolutely conscious. Like to have live instruments in this genre of music and a bunch of people playing it together, I think is something that we felt out the gates was missing in the city, and that there was also enough demand for. We were also open to the idea of like, maybe we do one of these and it flops and like no one cares and the jams don't work and it just doesn't work out. But it
was really an experiment from the get-go.
Oh yeah.
And like G and I knew each other loosely. We weren't like super close at that point. And Jahmal was the one who asked me. He was like, "We're putting together this thing. Do you want to?" Because he knew I owned synthesizers. I think he was just using me for my synthesizers. I see you, Jahmal.
That's kind of like when you're playing like street hockey as a kid.
Yeah, you
always pick that one kid that has like
the goalie, or whatever, right? So, but I came through and I was just excited to, I literally had never played on stage before, or I had played the last post in grade 7 on the trumpet, and I fucked it up.
Yeah.
So that's why, and nothing since.
Came out of retirement.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, this is the time. So, but it was an experiment. I remember just kind of thinking like, and talking to you guys, being like, let's see what happens,
Yeah.
And the room kind of filled up the first night. It wasn't like crammed, but it was like a good amount of people.
It was surprising. The whole thing from jump was surprising. I'd say like, there's a moment at practice when a few people are like trying out an idea, people are having drinks and they're chatting, and then an idea takes root on stage, and then people stop the chatter and the drinks stop clinking,
and that's when
and
you're hitting, right?
Yeah, and that happened on the first jam period, and that was like such a weight off our shoulders of like, this is actually going to work out.
And to answer your question, like I think everybody who was there, and because a lot of the people that were there were like friends of ours, and maybe of a particular musical sensibility, it sort of went that way anyway. But we definitely, like, we're open to letting things wander, but there's things that we want to avoid, and I can tell you what they are. One of them is reggae jams, and the other one is blues jams.
Okay.
Two very important.
And funk jams are like on the line.
Yeah.
They
got to be tight.
It's got to be like really funky, for real funky. Because man,
it can go south.
Do you remember?
Sometimes you got to kill a jam.
Has it ever turned into like sort of a Grateful Dead like Fish situation?
Well, there was a guy who showed up one time You know who I'm talking about. So for a little while we did it at the Drake in the upstairs, which was interesting, but we didn't like the vibe very much, so we ended up going to the underground. But when it was upstairs, it was like anybody who walked by could see what was going on inside, and it drew this whole crazy crowd of people, because it was always like people were like, "What is happening in there?" And this dude showed up who was like, pretty sure he just thought he was Bob Marley, but he was a white man, and he got up there and he was very like, respectful and stuff at first. Not that he wasn't respectful in the end, but we just thought, oh, here's a guy, he wants to do his thing. He gets up and we're like kind of side-eyeing each other, takes his shoes off, and he starts like putting his hands in the air and shaking his head like Bob Marley, and then telling people what to do on stage, like, you play this, and it was like, dude, this isn't your band. And he was playing covers or his own music or something.
Do you think this guy was just overly confident or just
crazy? I think he's performed. Like, I have a feeling he was like maybe like a hotel performer who played in the Caribbean for a long time or something like that.
Carnival Cruise.
Yeah, like he was practiced at what he did. Yeah. It's sometimes people practice really hard at things that they shouldn't practice. But so things,
and just don't bring that to practice. So it's a funny thing, right? Like a lot of people now, they'll hit us up on Facebook or Instagram, like, hey, I want to come. This is like my mixtape, and I got this thing going on, and they're like, I want to play a song at this time, and it's like, dude, come to a session, understand what it is, and then expect to try to get on stage the time after that, because a lot of people just. Open Jam says a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and the curious cats that come out, it creates some funny stories for us afterwards. Like when we're having a drink after, we get a good laugh sometimes. Yeah. But then being organizers of the event too, you want to keep
stress out because you can literally just see people leaving, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we don't want people to leave. We want more people to come in. And
so how do you kill that jam? Like.
Oh, we
guy's
literally
doing his
just
thing,
dead
or
it. Like we just
it's like,
look at the drummer and be like, "Yo,
wrap it up,
clench your fist and be done," because there's no time. I mean, sometimes we'll give things a little bit of a chance, and there's times when maybe we are too quick to kill something when we should have let it go. But
yeah, it's a fine balance. Sometimes like that 93rd second is like when the magic was about to show up, or like this isn't going there.
Yeah,
and you
because a lot of the time it's not even like bad or like it's not even that one person is overtaking it or anything. It's just boring, or like
or it's going against the vibe that you're trying to hit.
Yeah, like you can feel that everybody is stuck in a loop or something.
Yeah. And coming back to that idea of like, did we intentionally, conscientiously make it in a certain genre or a certain space? Things that we've done to propel that even forward is like the imitations jam that we've started doing recently, where the DJ the night will play like Bodak Yellow, or play some kind of like trappy beat, and the band has to recreate that, and that creates great energy for the audience because they understand what's happening. They see things unfold right before their eyes with something familiar, and it also steers the awkward funk jam that didn't work out back on track, without being too like Machiavellian about like, this is how it's got to go.
Yeah, because we also don't want to make people feel bad, right? Like if it's like you don't want to just be like shut up to somebody. Like when we kill things, we try and do it with humor and keep it rolling. Yeah. Because, like a lot of these people aren't that, like more and more it's pros who are coming, but a lot of people who are on stage are not like, super confident about being there, and we don't want to ruin their chances of coming back or something. But yeah, so it's a delicate balance.
You guys don't have like a lot of rules, but what are your few rules? Just
no beers on gears.
No beers on gears.
Can't put your drinks on your.
You know what our biggest rule is it's not about you. Yeah. And it's something that we would hang on a plaque above the stage if we could. Like, so that's number one for me anyway.
Absolutely. No, 100%. That's always been steadfast for us, and it's an important thing for the night to consistently be about the audience. Like, let's make something great for the audience. And again, that term jam can oftentimes mean I'm gonna go and flex my badass 64 bar guitar solo, and it's not about you, dude.
Yeah. No, it's crazy how bad guitar players want to turn up their amps.
Do you ever get like sort of an unconventional instrument into the mix.
Oh yeah, man. I'll never forget
piccolo, accordion.
homeboy with the electric violin.
Oh yeah, Andrew Ford.
Andrew
Yeah,
Ford.
yeah,
So he showed up early at Burdock, right?
yeah.
And I remember that, just hearing that, because like a lot of the time I was kind of in my own world if I was playing, and then you just suddenly hear like an electric violin, and you're like, damn. And we've had some great flute players.
Yeah. I will say Toronto loves a flute player.
It's sexy, man. When it happens and it's
Yeah.
well done. There's a girl who plays couple wind instruments who comes through. A woman, I should say. Sorry. I'm trying to get out of that habit. It's a weird thing.
That's been one of the best things of practice too. It's a bunch of guys that run it, and we're like trying to be very aware of our masculine privilege.
Yeah, it's difficult, man. We've worked with women in music to set up some like co-production events, or one so far.
Yeah,
but I think
yeah.
we want to do more. But it's like a thing. I've talked to a lot of female musicians who are just kind of like, it's a bro-y culture, you know, and they don't feel comfortable, especially the instrumentalists. Like a lot of vocalists are okay because they're used to kind of, you know, and they can kind of be separated a little bit from the band. But we're trying to really encourage more females, because like there's so many talented women in the city who play instruments that for one reason or another aren't hearing about it, or don't, you know, can't make it. I don't know, but
It's a bunch of dudes going, "Come to our night." It's like, no,
yeah, it's like,
I don't wanna
that's the
do
other thing.
that.
It's like, yo, it's not about.
I think it's like really, really important to like, you know, keep pushing that forward. And, you know, we see it, so it's so visual, right? It's so visible when you walk into a room and there's like 5 dudes on stage, and, you know, it can be so much more interesting if it was more mixed. And also making sure that we're aware of like, are we doing this thing the right way? We always say like the night that we did with Women in Music Canada was amazing, specifically watching the communication that was happening on stage between like a band of only women versus when it's like a bunch of dudes like, I gotta get my like crazy bass lines in it. It's like,
Yeah, and I talked to my friend Amy Basada, who was playing. I begged her to play. She's an amazing musician, and for some reason doesn't think she is. But I was like, you gotta just do this one, you know. So she played, and I was asking her like, how is that different than your average jam? And she was like, everybody was just like letting each other go, and like we were listening to each other. And I was like, yeah, we need that.
we need more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely less ego when, you know, women perform, I think, you know.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, man. It's become like, how do men turn everything into like
Shit.
well, no, I wasn't gonna say shit, but you know,
A pissing competition?
a chest thumping thing.
Yeah,
It's like you're
yeah.
supposed to be making something beautiful, and yet you're making it about how what a good mate you're gonna be or something. I don't know. But to get back to your question earlier, we want more weird or unusual instruments to a limit. There's been a couple. There was one guy who brought like a suitcase full of harmonicas for every key in the musical scale.
It was cool for one jam, and then it was like this. Yeah, we can't have you up here all night.
Yeah.
Too much harmonica. For
Yeah,
sure.
too much harmonicas. But no, we've had some very cool luck with like unique players,
Yeah,
unique instruments, but like people who play their instruments uniquely as well, which is kind of the best thing. Like not a lot of vanilla players, which is cool.
yeah.
So
Awesome. So in closing, if you guys were to recreate or create, your sort of dream team, and I know that you'd probably want to pick people that have played past practices, but let's look on like sort of on a grand scale of like established musicians, session players,
like a live or dead
and artists,
kind of thing.
live thing. If you guys, you know, and you know, they could be dead too. So
Right.
just pick like a bunch of musicians and a bunch of vocalists and MCs.
It's just Prince looping everything.
Yeah, Prince playing everything,
And his band joining.
which he's now capable of doing because he can be in multiple places at one time now that he's left his physical body.
There you go.
I don't know. Should we do a collaborative thing? Is that, or do
Yeah,
we each have to
absolutely.
do
Yeah, it
our
could be
own
a
line?
Yeah, I feel
conversation.
like that's got to be collaborative, because to be honest, you know, levels of instrumentalists like that, it's not my forte. That's not what I'm. Where
Yeah,
I'm
and
at.
I, you know, like a lot of the time, just in general, I may know somebody really well. I don't even know the names of my own songs. That's what I'm trying to get at. Like so, but
I'll throw a Thundercat. Like
Thundercat would be dope.
Very dope. Alive.
I think Herbie Hancock is always going to sit in on any jam, probably really, really nicely. He's a listener. Paco Peña, good Spanish flamenco guitar player, one of my favorites.
We also got to get you Ian Koiter from Practice's thoughts on this. I feel like he'd have.
Oh, he would know.
Dream
Yeah, he's got a encyclopedic. Who else would we get? I don't know. Like I'm trying to think of like people that are not necessarily stars in their own right, you know, like somebody that's going to sit in the cut with, oh man, this is a bit off. It's kind of on topic. I don't know if you guys read this, like, Quincy Jones.
The Quincy Jones.
I did.
So good.
That was great.
So-
It's like that's what everyone's been talking about this week.
It's incredible. So yeah, Quincy for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like him
But
talking
him not-
about how Hendrix was scared shitless of sitting in with like, who did he name? Like Toots and all these like random session guys. He named like 3 or 4 people, but like the fact that he's like, my friends scare Jimi Hendrix. Like, yeah, I can believe that. So maybe I would even just leave it up to, we just hire Quincy and then get him to fill the gaps. You know?
He'd know the ones.
Yeah, he'd know. Yeah.
All right,
So-
great. Well, thank you guys for being on the show.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us, man.
Thanks,
Appreciate
guys.
it.
Appreciate it, guys.
Cool.
Cheers.
You've been listening to episode 31 of This Broken Mixtape featuring Gaurav Sawhney and Gavin Whelehan, co-founders of the Toronto live music jam session, Practice. You can check out Practice at their next gig at the Drake Underground on Monday, March 19th. You can also stay up to date with all the latest news by following them on About Practice on Instagram. We really appreciate your support, and if you like our programming, please take the time to like, rate, and share our podcast so we can reach more listeners. Also be sure to check out thisbrokenmixtape.com to find this episode's Spotify playlist, as well as all of our other past interviews. You can also find us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and most recently, YouTube. Come back next week, where our special guest is 2003 DMC World Champion DJ, John Ryan Santiago, most well known as DJ Dopey. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you back here next week. Cheers.